Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Ndimuli. We now want to switch gears and get into a different conversation. And this is on 20 years of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, the NG-CDF. We're very privileged to have in studio this morning the Honorable Chair Olago Aluoch, who's the board chairperson of the NG-CDF. It's good to have you in studio. Karibu sana.
A pleasure, Ndimuli. It's good to be here.
20 years, and the years must have passed so quickly yes. Because this fund was started around 2005, 2003 to 2005.
2003.
Yes.
2003. That's when the law was enacted, but it came into effect on 15th of April 2004. So we are celebrating 20 years from 15th of April 2004.
Yes.
But we pushed this a little further today, up to this weekend on Friday, due to the diary of His Excellency the President. He was not able to get time on the 15th of April. So the earliest he could give the board was 3rd of May.
So we do expect there will be an elaborate event to mark the 20 years?
Elaborate national event on the 3rd of May. Graced by His Excellency the President. He has agreed to be our guest of honor. Yes.
And now it is 20 years later, it is unimaginable that any Kenyan or any constituency in Kenya would exist without NG-CDF. It has become a very integral part of our society. What are some of the key things you feel NG-CDF has become part of the Kenyan population?
I think the CDF was a fairly new phenomenon in 2004 when it started. But looking back over 20 years, we have come up with a model that is administratively cost-effective, rid of bureaucracy, and administrative is very cheap now. You know, like the President said once, it is one of the funds in the country that is managed at a very low cost, lowest cost. Yes. And I think this is because of the model that we are using in the CDF, where we have got constituency committees. In every constituency, there's a constituency CDF committee who then identify the projects of priority in that particular constituency, is costed and then forwarded to the board as a proposal. The board goes through the technical issues, costing, viability, and everything else, and then I decide to send down the funds to the constituencies. I think that's why the model that we're using has become effective and cheap.
Yet, when most Kenyans hear about the CDF, the first thing that comes to mind is bursaries. And is it probably the flagship deal that the CDF really targeted? That probably there were more on bursaries and some other things just came about much later?
No, originally, at inception, the idea was infrastructure development for education, security, and others. But as CDF evolved, it became apparent that there's a need for bursary. I think the poverty level of our people is very low. And to encourage the government policy of 100% transition, CDF came in very handy in paying fees for a lot of students who would otherwise not find their way to secondary schools or to tertiary colleges or universities. So I think CDF has been known for bursaries. And that's why in the last amendments to the law, which His Excellency signed in December last year, bursary was enhanced to 40% of the fund. Yes.
Yeah. What are the other major projects? You talked about infrastructure, especially for schools. What are the other projects that CDF is really intended for?
You see, by law, CDF can only apply its funds to functions which are purely based on national government, not county. And what we partner with a lot with the Ministry of Education for provision of infrastructure for schools and colleges. Ministry of Health in the provision of construction of medical training colleges all around the country. And we also partner with the Interior Ministry and the Police Department, National Police Service in construction of offices for administrators, sub-county administrators, assistant county, formerly DOs, chiefs, assistant chiefs, police stations, police patrol bases, and the sub-county police headquarters. So these have also enhanced security in all areas in the Republic where otherwise citizens would not have access easy access to services. Okay. It has also enhanced security because now people can move freely. They can do business longer hours, and that has helped in a lot of places.
And you are among the first members of parliament, because I know you've served as a member of parliament in Kisumu, yes, to have actually overseen these funds in your constituency. And kindly paint a picture for us from back then in 2007 when you were MP Kisumu
West.
Kisumu West.
Yes.
And now, and the kind of changes that this fund has gone through.
You know, in Ndimuli, I do not know whether it is because of the way CDF performed in Kisumu West when I was MP that made the authorities decide that you should head the CDF board. Maybe.
Probably.
Probably.
What is it that you did that was memorable in Kisumu West to the CDF?
You see, in Kisumu West, it's partially urban and partially rural. Yes. The urban part of the constituency was fairly well developed. Infrastructure was quite high. But in the rural part of the constituency, a lot had to be done. We didn't have, the schools were still mud-walled schools, no access to electricity, no access to roads. But I look back over the last 10 years, the improvement in that particular constituency. All the classrooms that were mud-walled are now cemented. They are all permanent, terrazzo floors, tiled floors. And you can see the pleasure in the faces of the children, the students and pupils. So it's something that makes me feel a lot of pleasure when I see this happiness in the children. Yeah.
And now, because of that, CDF is really associated with members of parliament. But you've talked about the constituency CDF boards on committees.
Committees, yeah.
Kindly paint for us a picture of what exactly the role of the CDF committees at the constituency level is and how much they determine in as far as what projects to undertake.
Let me tell you something in Ndimuli. The CDF has evolved from 2004 up to now, and I'm lucky that I've been part of that evolution in terms of amendments in Parliament. Some of the amendments to bring to CDF Act what it is now, some were initiatives from Parliament itself to make it more efficient. Some were also initiated because of the numerous litigation cases we have had in court challenging the legality of CDF. So amendments had to be made to the law to align the CDF to the Constitution and the law. But I look back and the model that we have, whereby the constituency development committees that we are talking about are the integral part of our development. Projects that come to the board to be funded must be projects that have gone through public participation, thorough public participation in every ward, in every constituency. The law says that the chairman of the committee at the constituency level, within the first year of his appointment, must hold public participation in all the wards in that constituency. At every ward, the residents identify their priorities. All these priorities from the wards are then accumulated and brought to the constituency committee, where they now look at the ones to be prioritized, they forward to the board. So within that model, then, there's no way that we can fund a project that is not a priority to the people in the constituencies. And the role of members of parliament have slowly been removed from the day-to-day running of the fund. Originally, 2004, members of parliament used to be referred to as the patrons.
Yes.
Not anymore.
What is their role now?
Their role is to oversight through parliamentary committees. Nothing more. If you look at the law the way it is now, and I think this now aligns it with the Constitution and separation of powers.
Yes.
Members of parliament now are not involved in the day-to-day running at all.
Yet they take a lot of credit for the success of NG-CDF.
I think it's because of our mindset, the Kenyan mindset. From the time when members of parliament used to be referred to as patrons, that mindset has stuck in us. We still look at MPs as patrons. In fact, as early as even this month, I've been to constituencies where projects funded by the board have written in bold, patron Honorable so-and-so, yes, MP. That's not the law.
Do you feel like we'll ever get to a point where we could totally disengage members of the National Assembly from the CDF?
Yes. Yes, I see a time very soon where the role of members of parliament will be understandable to them even, because as we speak now, the members of parliament still feel that they are the ones who can direct what needs to be done in the constituency.
Yes.
Their role is to oversight through parliamentary committees. In fact, our first committee, the one that we are directly answerable to, is the National Assembly Select Committee on NG-CDF. That is chaired by Honorable Sirma of Eldama Ravine. That's the committee that we fall directly under. But in addition to that committee, we also are oversighted by the Devolved Funds Committee. Okay. We are also oversighted by 2 other committees. In fact, I think of all the other state corporations in our republic, the one that is oversighted most is NG-CDF.
Okay.
Yes.
And you mentioned in passing about some of the legal challenges that the fund has faced, especially litigation on its legality. I remember the Supreme Court made a pronouncement on the legality of CDF, and after that there have been attempts to try and entrench the same into the Constitution, the latest being through the NADCO process as well. And one wonders, where does NG-CDF stand with all those legal challenges? If at all you can just provide clarity on the legality of this fund.
I think the fundamental issues that have arisen over all those litigations in court have been the involvement of members of parliament, separation of powers. Because members of parliament cannot on one side legislate and then on the other side sit to look at how the funds are being implemented on the ground. This has been the fundamental fact about all those cases. But because of that, slowly parliament has been able to legislate to align the CDF with the Constitution. As we speak now, the last role that MPs had in the management of this fund was a clause in the Act that used to be called oversight committees at the constituency, where members of parliament were integral. They sat on that committee. In the latest amendments of December last year, that clause was repealed, it was removed. So that was the last contact members of parliament had with the management of the fund, oversight committees. It's no longer there. Okay. So I see a bright future, with little litigation against CDF as we move forward.
But if at all it's part of what the NADCO process seems
I was going to talk about that in Muli, just a moment, because apart from that, clause that was removed, the NADCO report, the two sides may have disagreed on several issues, but one issue that both sides agreed on was that NG-CDF must be put in the Constitution. That is agreed by both sides.
So it is still not yet...
not yet,
yes.
Not yet. It's work in progress. But I think now Parliament is moving towards implementing the NADCO report. And I believe they're going to look at the amendments, whether we can have NG-CDF in the Constitution without a referendum or by a referendum. Okay. So I think that's what Parliament is going to deal with.
Okay. But on this issue of disengaging members of the National Assembly from the running of the NG-CDF, we've seen accolades being given to certain members on the best use of CDF, and probably some getting applause on how CDF has been properly run in their respective constituencies in comparison to others. And one of the questions that arise there is one of standardization, and secondly, are we still sure that the MP has nothing to do with the running of the CDF at the ground level?
You see, at the CDF, at the constituency level, members of parliament can provide policy direction only, and then the committee under the chairmanship, the chair of the committee, secretary of the committee, and the members of that committee are the ones to identify the projects. But when these committees do excellent jobs and the constituency is rated, normally the board will rate the top 10. For obvious reasons, you don't say who are the top, the lower 10. The top 10, then the media will then pick who is the MP in that constituency. So it's not really the board, it's the media that picks on the MP and say, constituency X, MP so-and-so is number one in performance. Yes.
Okay.
But there are a lot of things, by the way, if you talk about standardization, there are a lot of issues that we need to look at because Kenya is diverse and no one constituency is the same as the other. So when we are going to look at standardization and look at issues that cut across all constituencies, that can become measurable. Now, CRIs is not very easy, but we are working towards that.
Okay.
Yes.
Because the issue that occurs is, does it mean that my MP, because probably the amount I get from our constituency, for our constituency is lesser than the other constituency? And that's the issue, that's the kind of question Kenya's asking. Are some constituencies treated unfairly when it comes to the disbursement of the CDF kitty?
No. The law requires that the funds which we receive, which are to be disbursed to the constituencies, 75% is disbursed equally to all constituencies. 25% of the funds is disbursed according to the number of wards. The fewer the wards, the less the money, the more the wards, the more the money. So the disparity between the disbursements to constituencies differ, but slightly. Not in a way that would affect development, only slightly. But, okay, there are people who say that that is not the best way of dividing the funds. We'll have constituencies that have, say, about 20 secondary schools, about 30 primary schools. Then there are others which have about 100 primary schools, 80 secondary schools. Now look at that situation. The amount of money is the same. The schools and the number of students and pupils are different. So clearly, some constituencies are more constrained than others. Okay. And that's something that we have, the board and the parliament has to look at. How do we make disbursements to constituencies as equitable as possible?
Okay.
Yeah.
One way would be looking at the population growth of different areas. And we come at a time that there was to be an anticipated review of boundaries and delimitation of boundaries and review of constituencies and the number of wards.
Yes.
That did not happen. We are in defiance of the Constitution as at the end of last month. It did not happen. How does that affect CDF going forward?
You see, population statistics have changed clearly in the last 10 years or so. And indeed, it's true that IBC should have been in place to look at delimitation of new boundaries for constituencies and wards. But now with IBC not in place for the last 2 years, and the end of this parliament also approaching, there won't be any time to do this delimitation properly because it's a very motive exercise where you are going to either make some constituencies smaller or bigger. It's very emotive. I don't see it happening. But that simply means for us at the board, we have got to continue with the law as it is. Using
previous data from before the last census?
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
Wouldn't that disenfranchise some constituencies where population has really grown in comparison to others?
Certainly, certainly. And that I'm throwing the gauntlet to the parliamentarians. You see, as a board, we implement the law that the parliament makes.
Yes.
Until parliament and the IBC makes new laws, we have to go by the law that are in place as it is now.
Okay.
We can't make laws on our own.
Now, the issue with that is that many of these parliamentarians, because they continue receiving accolades and applause, depending on the performance of CDF, whether or not they're delinked, that they may be very emotional or emotionally attached to the fund, even when making legislation regarding to, with regard to how the funds should be run. Are you safe? Are you saying the CDF is safe from this kind of manipulation or influence from the National Assembly?
It's not really, it's not really manipulation or influence, but I think it's interest. The way the CDF has impacted on the lives of Kenyans is such that everybody appreciates it. I've been to constituencies where residents tell me, Chairman, here, if it was not for CDF, we don't know where we would have been. Close your eyes, Chair, for a moment and imagine where we are. Where would we be without bursaries, without police stations, without chief's offices? I close my eyes, I open and say, indeed, CDF has impacted lives positively. But I don't want to say that members of parliament have no role to play. All I want to say is that the members of parliament must appreciate their role, because if they don't appreciate their role, then we are going to end up in court once more.
Okay.
And their role must be to oversight the board and the constituencies in parliament, not on the ground. Now, when members of parliament receive accolades, as you say, when their committees do well and receive accolades, I think the media also need to understand that the accolades should be to the constituency committees. You can then say the member of parliament is so and so, but not that the member of parliament has performed so well, no.
Okay, and now in the 20 years that the CDF, initially CDF, eventually NG-CDF has been in existence, what can you say has really changed in terms of if it was to be run as an organization, NG-CDF, the one that you chair, what has really changed in terms of the practices, the standards that you've employed in running that institution?
I think for once, the relationship between the board and parliament has become much better, so that the board and the committee on parliament can sit down and look at what amendments do we need and why. Do we need to change the amount of money that we put towards bursaries? Now with the climate change and the effort of the government on climate change mitigation, what do we need to do? And in the last amendments that the president signed, Parliament introduced 5% of the funds for the constituencies to be put towards climate change mitigation. That was not there before.
Okay.
Yes.
Won't that present a problem now that environment, especially the environmental matters close to that, is a devolved function? If at all now CDF wants to do something similar that the county governments seek to do as well?
We are working very closely with the Council of Governors so that we don't have duplicity of efforts. The board does not involve itself in issues that the Council of Governors also get involved in. And so far, we have not had a serious conflict yet. But in terms of climate change, we know what the role of national government should be, the role of the county government. But it's a whole government approach. It's not something that you can say is for national government, county governments only. Both levels of government must be involved. But for us, it's national government. We also introduced ICT hubs. You know the government's policy on ICT. We are introducing ICT hubs in every constituency, funded by the board. And of course, we are waiting for guidelines from the Minister of ICT. All this is meant to put Kenya where we want it. And CDF really, as a plan that we have, impacts to the ground, because when you're implementing projects, you have a local contractor who engages local labor, who purchases local materials from local shops. At the end of the day, this trickles down to the common man on the ground in that constituency. So again, that helps in the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. It's a real, live model of better.
Okay.
Yes.
Now that you've seen the success of the NG-CDF in constituencies, now we've seen the push by other elected leaders to have their own funds. The NGAF, the National Government Affirmative Action Fund. We've seen even senators asking for the oversight fund, and even MCAs asking for word development fund.
Yeah.
And are we being honest in saying that members of the National Assembly are totally delinked from this fund when everyone else now wants to ape what the member of the National Assembly is doing?
I see in your words, Ndimuli, I see in your words what goes on in the minds of the people, that there's no way you can take away CDF from members of parliament. It is the history that we have had from CDF, basically from its start 2004 up to now. But I think there's a need now for us to have a whole government approach, both at MCAs, women reps, and all the others who want funds for development, senators, so that we don't have these different, buckets, small buckets, big buckets, all for development. It's going to be difficult to manage. But what I know, the infrastructure for management of the fund that we have at the board is the best in this country. I'm being very impartial, but I think it's the best. We don't have similar systems for any of the other funds. Even GAF, as a board, they don't have systems on the ground. There's no way you can identify from the grassroots what needs to be done. But I think ultimately we need to look at how all these development funds can be put together so that we don't have duplicity.
Because there's been an issue of duplication of even some bursary benefits. Someone comes and gets bursary from the NG-CDF and goes to NGAF, gets bursary. The government has, the governor has his own bursary kitty. The same person benefits. And without proper data, it would mean that all these initiatives, however well-meaning, may not really cater adequately to the population. Some people may end up benefiting more than others.
I agree with you totally. The system that we have in place now.
Do you have any mechanism to actually remedy that situation?
For us in CDF, we are in the process. We are in the process of digitalizing our operations throughout the country, so that at the click of a button, we'll be able to know if applicant A has made a request for bursary from constituency A, at the same time constituency B, or any others. So within our system, we are going to get know that. But I think we want to have a system when we digitalize, a system that can then integrate with the others in government, so that this issue that somebody gets bursary from all the others, including CDF, can be eliminated.
Okay.
Digitalization is the only way out. Yes.
And because we've dealt with politicians, and yes, we may try and say MPs are not really running CDF, but some MPs, some members of the National Assembly could be a bit cheeky and try and influence how this money is spent, who gets benefit, who gets bursary here and there, because they're also influential even over the committees. Do we have mechanism to deal with that?
The process, if I confine myself for now to bursary applications, the process is meant to be foolproof, so that only the needy get assistance. But the influence of members of parliament in their constituencies cannot be underestimated. And indeed, it's only in a few constituencies where you find there's conflict between the committee and the member of parliament. In most constituencies, they work very closely, and they look at member of parliament as there's a word they use, stakeholder number one.
Okay, stakeholder number one.
Stakeholder number one. So they say stakeholder number one wants us to do this. My advice to my CDF committees has always been, as a representative of the people, you can communicate the wishes to you as the committee. But you, the chairperson of the committee, the secretary of the committee, and the fund manager, our fund manager, you have a duty to ensure that whatever stakeholder number one wants to be done is done according to law, so that issues don't arise. And I think in most constituencies have been doing that. And the way they spend money is accountable, is transparent. And when the Auditor General looks at our books, they give us green bill of health. But I think we have got about 3 constituencies. You have heard about the fiery awards, where institutions that do very well in terms of accountability, transparency in public funds, where they are awarded. We have had about 5 constituencies being awarded.
After based on audited accounts, or
audited accounts, based on audited accounts, there are constituencies that have done very well. Some of them have got 3 awards annually, 3 consecutive years. So it's now a question of how the board audits the committees. Under the law, as a board, we are required to produce 292 audit reports
for each constituency.
Each constituency, we must have 1 audit report for each constituency. Then we have 1 for the board.
Okay.
Yes. So I think the law, in terms of audit, gives us very little room to maneuver, and we comply. And we'll be doing very well.
Okay.
Yes.
But what about those poor performers? What happens to them when you realize that a particular constituency has not been managing its CDF kitty properly? Is there room for the board, the one you chair, to actually rein in?
There are a few cases where indeed some constituencies have done very badly. Where we have been able to identify, we send our own auditors to check on how they have been performing, what has gone wrong. In some cases, where the extreme is detected, we refer the chairperson and the fund manager for further investigations by either DCI or EACC, where we see evidence of criminal conduct. Where there is no evidence of criminal conduct, then the board engages administratively with the fund manager who is in charge.
By administratively, what do you mean?
Administratively, I mean either dismissal or no.
Do we have any active cases in court emanating from audits of different constituency committees that have mismanaged?
Yes, there are cases. We have some civil cases, some criminal cases, but there are not many. What as a board, what we try to do is not let constituencies get to that level. We try to monitor them from time to time. And our people, our management team, both at the headquarters and also at the regions, monitor how they perform. That way we reduce cases, extreme cases. We are able to detect wrongdoings before they get out of hand.
Okay.
Yes.
And one would imagine if, because now this is a national government CDF kitty, the government already has administration officers across the country. And most of these constituencies could more or less be referred as sub-counties. And each sub-county has a deputy commissioner?
Deputy county commissioner.
A deputy county commissioner.
Yeah.
Why is that line of government administration not involved in the management of NG-CDF? So that probably would link the politicians from this, probably.
The law requires that in every constituency, the deputy county commissioner in that constituency is an automatic member of the Constituent Development Committee. So there's coordination. That is by law. So, you know, again, the presence of the DCC in these committees also proves as a buffer between politicians and the other members of the committee. Yes. And so far, we have done very well by coordinating with them. And whether we are doing police stations, police headquarters, police posts, chief's offices, assistant chief's offices, DCC's offices, the DCC as the integral person that we deal with. In terms of, you know, when you're going to build a DCC's office or a police station, you don't just get an architect to draft, to draw. You know, you need specialized drawings. You know, like if it's a police station, you want where is the armory? Where is the gender desk? Where is OCS going to sit? Where are the male cells, female cells? So we coordinate very closely with the ministries when we do this, when we are doing this.
Yeah. And of course, marking 20 years of anything is a very momentous occasion. And I know you sit back and look back and say, fine, we've done some fine work in one area, probably some failures in others. In your own admission, where do you think there's room for growth for the NG-CDF and areas of improvement going forward?
Looking at our success in the past and looking at the future, I see CDF becoming even more integral in terms of development in the country. You may have noticed, if you follow CDF, you may have noticed that right now there are ministries who are relying on CDF to implement their plans. Our biggest partner is Ministry of Education. Ministry of Education in provision of JSS classrooms, there's been a challenge. And now the understanding between Parliament and the ministry is what we call a shilling for a shilling, where they contribute is about 3 billion shillings to CDF, and CDF matches that with the equivalent amount for schools which have been identified by the Ministry of Education for construction of JSS classrooms. Ministry of Health is partnering with CDF in construction of MTCs. We have about 63 in the country, which have been constructed by CDF. Again, when you're putting up an MTC, it's not just a building like a classroom, no. They're specialized buildings, which you need to have architects and technicians from the Ministry of Health and KMTC board. Now we ICT, ICT hubs. We can't build ICT hubs on our own. So we are collaborating very closely with the Ministry of ICT in identifying areas, constructing, designing the hubs, and how they are going to be maintained, sustained. So, I see as we move forward, CDF being very integral with other ministries.
Okay.
You remember, before Professor Magoha died, Ministry of Education were building classrooms on their own. And Professor Magoha said this is cheaper. It turned out that construction was not up to standard. The ministry didn't have people on the ground to supervise the constructions. And then now, the ministry is now using CDF to do that.
Mechanism.
Yes. So I believe that the system that we have in place they are strong, and they're going to be strong as we move forward. And as chairman of the board, I'm happy about the goodwill that we have from our CS, the Treasury, and the President himself. That goodwill is something we want to build on to make CDF an example, a shining example in our country.
Of course, there have been complaints about late disbursement of the fund and how it affects a lot of things, especially schools. Right now we're in a situation where we have a flooding situation. Some of those classrooms have been destroyed. And I don't know how much they will rely on CDF for the reconstruction and going forward. How bad is the situation when it comes to government mechanism and the timely release of funds?
Timely release of funds by the Treasury is a challenge which, as a board chair, we understand at the board. Because release of funds will depend on the performance of the economy. Our economy is not performing as well as they should. So there's been very slow release of funds from the exchequer. But you remember early this year, when the delay, last year, when schools were about to open, we had not received money from the Treasury, and MPs...
They almost went on strike.
They said no CDF, no parliament, no CDF, no parliament. But as a board, we understand that we are going through very constrained financial times. The Treasury has undertaken to Parliament to be releasing funds, about 10 billion per month to the board. And I think MPs have understood that indeed we can't do better than that. And so far, the Treasury has been complying with that undertaking. As a board, as soon as we receive funds from the Treasury, my staff burn the midnight oil. Within 2 days, all those monies are disbursed to the constituencies. That's one aspect. The second aspect is how CDF is coming in terms of tragedy, like now flooding. In a lot of places in our republic now, classrooms have collapsed, toilets have collapsed. Indeed, as I speak with you now, up to Friday last week, I had about 8 MPs who had been to my office and the CEO's office with problems that we are going to open school next week. Classrooms have collapsed. There are no toilets. What do we do? So as I get back to the board from here, we have to sit down as a board and find out what are we going to do. Yes. Okay. And of course, you are aware, the Ministry of Education has now postponed school opening dates for another 1 week. So that 1 week now is going to give us time to think, how do we help constituencies? Yeah.
Something interesting in today's dailies is the fact that the government is looking to cut the budget possibly by about 350 billion shillings. That could affect a lot. Do you anticipate any budget cuts for the CDF kit?
Budget cuts, government budget cuts and measures to contain the expenditure by the government is something that we are very conscious about. We have had a meeting at State House twice on how we can cut down on expenditure. Then we had, the other week, we had a conference at BAMBA, the 3rd National Bill Conference, Wage Bill Conference. All these were geared towards how do we reduce inefficiency and wastefulness, how do we reduce corruption, and how do we enhance efficiency. That was the subject. Now, all this boils down to what the position of CDF in all this. The act under which we operate says that 2.5% of the national government share of revenue will come to CDF. So by law, it is fixed.
Okay.
So the government cannot reduce it. There could be a delay in disbursing, but it can't be reduced as it is now.
Okay.
Yes. So, I mean, with serious responsibility like that, we have got to look forward to use the monies we receive well.
Okay.
Because the law says that our funds cannot be reduced, even however poorly the economy performs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So beyond the legal challenges that are so obvious and people have talked about for quite a while, and probably the attempts to remedy, what is the other serious challenge that the CDF is facing?
One of the biggest challenges, of course, was litigation, which now for me, as a lawyer, can say is a thing of the past. I do not expect that going forward we are going to have as many court cases against CDF as we used to have. You know, those court cases stagnated growth. They also placed an element of uncertainty in the way you're operating. I think that's now clearer. Mm-hmm. The only challenge I see going forward is performance of our economy. Mm-hmm. Okay, the future looks bright, but as long as we are not performing very well, this is going to be a strain on the government. Mm-hmm. I understand. And how the cabinet is going to handle this together with the Treasury Ministry that we fall under is something I cannot tell. But that could be a challenge as we go forward.
Wow.
Yes.
Interesting. And as we come to the end of this conversation, once more, looking back at the 20 years of the existence of the CDF, I'm sure there must be some very brilliant success stories that whenever you get an opportunity to tell, that is a go-to story, and you say CDF changed the life for such a population or an individual. Which is that story that...
I think some of these success stories will come up, you know, at the 20th anniversary celebrations on Friday. But one of them that I think about is an MP, a member of parliament, who went through secondary school, paid for by CDF bursary, mm-hmm. through university, paid for by CDF bursary. He trained, and now he's a member of parliament.
Oh. Are you in a position to reveal the name?
No, not today. Not today.
We'll find out.
We'll find out on Friday.
Okay.
But there are many other success stories, many, of people whose lives have been changed. Orphans who have become serious people, senior people in the country through CDF. So, you know, the bursary is one of the components of our functions that has uplifted a lot of people in a lot of places. Okay. Yes.
And you mentioned that the media is always quick to applaud or even give credit to some members of parliament with regard to the performance of the CDF in particular constituencies. I don't know if you are in agreement with the kind of assessment the media has done, or do you think that the question is, if you are asked which constituency has performed the best as far as the management and use of CDF, is it one that you can mention?
You know, I can mention.
Or even the top 5, for example.
I could mention Mukurweini, I could mention Kasipul Kabondo. Mm-hmm. Those two come to my fingertips because they have performed very well, and they, you know, even getting the awards, you know, in terms of transparency and auditing and all that. But there are many others that may not find themselves in that category, but they have done equally well. Because
people have been talking about Kiharu constituency, especially in media, and I was wondering if at all you were in agreement with the same assessment, or sometimes probably the way we assess as a media is a bit different from
I don't want to get into a controversy about Kiharu in Nimuli, but because the assessment on Kiharu is not done by the board.
Okay.
It's not been done by the board, so I won't be able to say anything about Kiharu. But the one that we assess, we try to be as objective as possible and fair as possible. And
Mukurweini and Kasipul Kabondo come out on top?
They come out on top.
Okay, right. Yes. Any more words to add, anything as you make your final comment?
I want to thank Kenyans for the support they have shown towards CDF for 20 years now, and urge that we continue to participate from wherever we are in the country. Please look at CDF as one of the components of the funds, of the public fund that come to the ground. Mm-hmm. Don't sit and don't be aloof. Be involved in how the funds are managed in your constituency. Mm-hmm. Either be a whistleblower or be a participant, because I see CDF as the vehicle that's going to be used to develop our country.
Right. Thank you so much, Bwana John Olago Aluoch, Chairperson, Board, National Government Constituency Development Fund, giving us time to understand more about NG-CDF as we mark 20 years of this special fund, which was started as far back at the year 2003, at least the idea in 2003. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best as you mark the 20th anniversary of this fund.
It's been a pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're still watching Morning Cafe. We have a lot more in store for you. Let's take a break now. We'll be back with more.